好，歡迎大家嚟到今日警方嘅記者招待會啊。
Today's press briefing. First, I will introduce the 7 speakers today. In the middle, that is Mr. Chuck Hao-yip, Regional Commander of Kowloon West. And to his left is that Mr. Session Chung, Chief Superintendent of BPRB. And to Mr. Chuck's right was the Mr. Chen Hing-yong of the Fire Service Department. And next to Mr. Chair, Mr. Kong Wing-chang. And next to Mr. Kong, and for the Mr. Lai Kwai-wah, Senior Superintendent of OCTB. And on the left, we have Mr. Wang Wei-shan, Senior Superintendent of Operations, and next to him is Superintendent of Cybersecurity and Technology Crime Bureau, Mr. Swalik Mohammed. The speaker would speak in turns, then will open the floor to questions. And may the media who like to ask questions, please may put up their hand and we'll hand over the microphone. And the maximum question per reporter is 3. Without further delay, I'll hand over the floor to Mr. Chuck. Over the 4 months, scenes of violent destruction, arson, and assault has become routine. Very often, it starts with a seemingly peaceful public procession, then a black-clad person that with face covered will destroy it and set fire. And recently, we started to have homemade bombs or suspected bombs. These scenes of violent destruction have become very tiring, nauseating, while the public's life has been disrupted significantly. We have prepared some clipping to sum up yesterday's destruction. We now play the clips, please. So while I explain, there will be photos put on the screen, so please take note to the screen as well. Yesterday, the destruction by the violent protesters affected large swath of the population. Wherever they go, shopping malls have been closed early. While traffic have been disrupted, the public simply couldn't go anywhere. They have extensively damaged the traffic lights and pulled out this wiring. There's over 100 sets of traffic lights destroyed. About 93 of those are still out of order, mainly in the Yaoqing district, mainly Nathan Road, Canton Road. Over the past few months, over 400 sets of traffic lights have been destroyed by the rioters successively. We passed by Kowloon today. You can see the scale of destruction, and the traffic queues have started from Changsha-Wan Samshui all the way to Yamate in Tsim Sha Tsui. And as a result of the destruction in Kowloon district, over 16 bus routes had to be suspended. About 91 bus routes have been diverted. The target of the violent protesters have been targeting the local infrastructure, affecting passengers and visitors. Yesterday, the protesters threatened to extensive damage to the high-speed rail station in West Kowloon, and the number of passengers have halved from previous Sunday, only about 1,400,000. The destruction have disrupted traffic and affected livelihood. This harmed others with benefiting no one. There are casually damaged public facilities and shops, but have the citizens and the vendors paying the bill. The violent protesters are targeting shops which they think have a different political perspective, and willing destruction on banks, and also pry open the gates of the banks, snack shops, and Chinese medicine shops, and looted and gutted the shops and actually set fire to the shops. And some of the fires and smoke have actually went up to the domestic units upstairs. I would like to provide you with some relevant figures for reference. And just yesterday itself, there were 10 arson cases committed by the protesters, and from 1st of October to now, we have over 80 cases of arson. And for just yesterday, there was 7 cases of criminal damage, and since the 1st of October, there were a total of 752. And most of the places destroyed or set on fire were shops. And while the shop only counted the stock, besides destruction, there are also lost property. In one particular case, they found that the value of lost property and gadgets and phones are worth a total of $2.5 million, and this having count the cost of repairing the shops. And for those who destroyed the roller shutters and vandalized the store inside and even commit theft, this is not just criminal damage. They also commit a burglary. The maximum sentence is 14 years in prison. Since the 1st of October, there are 28 cases of burglary. And it has been proven that in unrest or protest, someone will seize the chance to loot the shops. Why could they do so? Because the rioters have broke open the gates, and the materials from a lot of construction sites have been taken by the protesters to set up roadblocks or to weapons to attack policemen. Since the 1st of October, there are 6 cases of theft.
The acts of the rioters actually have nothing to do with their demands. They are criminal behaviors. Just look at yesterday in Kowloon. Over 100 petrol bombs have been heard by rioters, and they have targeted MTR stations, banks, shops, police stations, and police officers. And there were a lot of fires being started whenever the rioters went. In Prince Edward, some rioters have heard patrol bombs from vehicular flyovers towards police officers being stationed down from the flyovers. And it was very fortunate that the explosion of the fuel bomb was next to the police officer instead of on him, and his legs were being burned. And 11 MTR stations entrances have been set fire to. And from the front line, we can see that when rioters were hurling petrol bombs, and they were getting more and more rampant and more reckless. And I just want the rioters to know that whatever they're doing, there will be consequences. Yes, last night, rioters have heard petrol bombs at police vehicles, but those rioters have been immediately subdued by police officers. I just want to warn the rioters who are hurling petrol bombs that hurling petrol bombs is equal to arson, and according to Hong Kong's law, the maximum penalty would be life imprisonment. And whatever the demands that the rioters are saying they would like to achieve, it does not provide any justification for committing violent acts on police facilities, police officers. And recently, rioters have started using explosives, or they've been resorting to suspected bombs. And just yesterday in the Kowloon area, we have already spotted at least 4 suspected explosives, including at Prince Edward Laichikok Road. And we discovered a carton box that was connected to wires, and we suspected that it was a bomb. And while we had to deal with riots and unrest, at the same time we had to disperse the crowd so that explosives handling department's colleagues could deal with a suspected bomb. And they have decided to immediately detonate it. And rioters were using suspected bombs in order to distract police and in order to spread our resources thin. And so that was really very, very underhanded. More importantly, when these suspected explosives appear very frequently, then it would really insensitize the vigilance of our citizens. And when real bombs occurred, then they would not be taken seriously by citizens, and that could lead to a lot of casualties. And no matter what, for all suspected bombs, they will be dealt with professionally and very seriously, and especially in demonstration areas. Homemade bombs have occurred, and they have been set off clear police vehicles. I just want to say that yesterday, when there was very widespread riots, the police force continued to carry out crowd dispersal at various areas. I just want to report that yesterday afternoon at Tsim Sha Tsui Nathan Road near the Kowloon Mosque, specialized vehicles for crowd management have made use of colored water in order to disperse the crowd, and accidentally the mosque was affected. And we just want to apologize once again to the Kowloon Mosque and also the Muslim community. And our police districts have taken the initiative to get into contact with Muslim communities and to apologize to them for the incident. I'm very appreciative that the Kowloon Mosque and the Muslim community have shown support towards the police, and we continue to maintain very close contact with them. Moreover, I understand that when police made use of colored water for crowd dispersal, other structures, including churches and residences, have been affected, and we like to apologize to any affected parties for that. If anyone or any parties have been affected by these actions, we sincerely would like to apologize to them. Hong Kong is a very diverse community, and the police force respects utmostly religious freedom and also all religious organizations. And definitely, there is no malevolence on our part, and no intention on our part to offend any religious organizations. And we'll continue to maintain very close touch with religious and community leaders so that we can continue to maintain public safety and order. Now I'm going to repeat what I said in English.
Over the weekend, an unauthorized assembly in Kowloon yet again turned it into chaos. There was widespread rioting at different districts in Kowloon. Rioters set buildings on fire, disrupted transport facilities, launched hit-and-run attacks on public properties, and inflicted extensive damages to shops. There is also rampant looting of shops. Such routine rioting acts pose a grave threat to public safety. We express the strongest condemnation. As a matter of fact, rioters hurled more than 100 petrol bombs at buildings, police offices, and into crowds. Over 100 sets of traffic lights were damaged, and 93 of them are still out of order. The damaged traffic lights are located mainly in Yau Ma Tei, Tsim Sha Tsui, and Mong Kok districts. Today, our frontline officers have to direct the traffic on roads as an emergency measure. Most alarmingly, there were 4 instances where suspected bombs were found yesterday. The police strongly condemn all these lawless and reckless behavior. No excuse can justify these acts of violence against our own community. Due to rioting acts I just mentioned, our frontline officers had to use appropriate force to restore public order. At around 4 p.m., the police deployed a specialized crowd management vehicle to disperse rioters gathered on Nathan Road. As the vehicle approached Nathan Road outside the Kowloon Mosque, colored water was used for dispersal. During the process, the colored water inadvertently affected the entrance and front gate of the Kowloon Mosque. Immediately after the incident, our police representative offered sincere apologies to the chief imam and the Muslim community leaders. Later at night, the district commander of Yau Chim district and the representative of police public relations branch met with the imams in the mosque to show our concern. We are deeply concerned about this incident, so Chief Executive and Commissioner of Police visited the Kowloon Mosque to meet with the chief imam and Muslim community leaders this morning. The police have all along maintained a good relationship with the Kowloon Mosque and the Muslim community in Hong Kong. We are also aware that our use of specialized crowd management vehicle in Tsim Sha Tsui has affected another place of worship on Nathan Road. We certainly respected religious freedom in Hong Kong and will strive to protect all places of worship. As the head of the Kowloon West region, I would like to reiterate that we certainly do not have any malicious intent. We endeavor to protect the community. We once again express our sincere apology. Thank you. 接住落嚟咧，我想交俾阿謝 Sir 講一講過去週末警方行動中嘅拘捕數字等等嘅資料。阿謝 Sir，唔該，謝 Sir。
Now I'm going to hand over to Officer Jack. Now regarding number of arrests during the past few days, from Friday to Sunday or October 18th to 20th, 60 persons have been arrested, 53 male, 15 female, and their ages 15 to 67, and they were suspected of having committed a range of criminal behaviors ranging from theft, unlawful assembly, and being masked during unlawful assembly, criminal damage, wounding, public fighting, and possession of offensive weapons. And among one of the arrests yesterday, actually was acted upon intelligence that we received, and we intercepted a taxi, and we have intercepted a very large batch of few bombs, and there were 2 men on the vehicle, ages 31 and 34, and they were arrested for possession of offensive weapons. And in terms of court cases, a 22-year-old man was suspected of attacking another man in the afternoon of October 19th at 5 o'clock using a knife, attacking the victim at the abdomen as well as back of the neck. And so he was being taken to court on the charge of wounding. And in terms of use of ammunition, the police force did not use any live ammunition. On Friday and Saturday, the police did not use any ammunition, but yesterday, in actions, the police used CS grenade plus CS round 260, rubber baton round plus rubber slug 130, super sock 20, 40 mm launcher 40. And during the weekend actions, 4 police officers have been wounded, and yesterday, a police officer was being injured by a few bombs, and the officer suffered second grade burn, and he was already released from hospital after treatment. I just want to clarify one thing. At 2 o'clock yesterday, a man walked past Tsim Sha Tsui police station, and he saw that there were rioters trying to damage facilities at the police station, and he took the initiative to try to stop them. However, he was being beaten up by the rioters, and he suffered injuries to his corner of his mouth. And our colleagues have immediately taken him so that he would not be attacked any further. And this is not a police officer.
And for the protests and assembly activities in Kowloon District yesterday, the participants have set up barricades and throwing petrol bombs and set fire at different places, including MTR station, banks, shops, police stations, even at police officers, yielding large-scale destruction and injuries. And for the fire related to yesterday's activities, most all concentrated in Kowloon, a total of 77 cases. We found that in Prince Edward Road West and intersecting the Lachikot Road, and some protesters have hurled petrol bombs from the flyover, injuring officer, and multiple MTR stations, Yau Ma Tei, Tsim Sha Tsui, Mong Kok, and Prince Edward, Lai Chi Kok, and other station exits that have been blocked by protesters or even set on fire or being thrown petrol bombs. On Nathan Road, multiple shops, banks have been set on fire. FST maintains that throwing petrol bombs and commit arson is disregarding human lives. Even at the station exits and shops that have been closed, there might be staff doing maintenance or other duties. Obstructing the exits and setting fire seriously endanger public safety. And there are residents above the shops. There might be the elderly, children, or other mobility impaired persons. The fire and the smoke have spread. That is not something we can predict. If it can cause a blaze, the consequence will be unimaginable. The FT will deal with protest-related fire. We need to deal with other emergency calls. While on average, each day we need to deal with 90 fires, 100 special service requests, and over 2,000 emergency and ambulance requests. The road blocking and arson will affect our emergency services and resource allocation. For yesterday, in Kowloon District, the time arriving to scene, we only achieved a 43.2% that hit the performance target. You can see the impact to our services. And recently, someone has said on social media that the FST vehicles have been used by the police to provide cover or police to conduct dispersal operation. I would like to clarify that this had never happened. For yesterday, unlawful assembly, the protester intercepted and obstructed our emergency vehicles from doing our duties. This is unacceptable. The FST would issue the strongest condemnation to such acts. I reiterate that saving lives and putting out fires and every second counts. Any obstruction will endanger public lives and property, which is extremely irresponsible. I'd like to take this chance to explain why there are police personnel on FST vehicles or ambulances. For FST vehicles, there is one scenario where a police officer will board such vehicles. There were large fire or major incidents when our mobile command unit arrived at the scene, the police officer may come up to do coordination or discuss our deployment. And for the police FSC vehicles running, there will not be officers inside. For ambulances, police officer may present in the following scenarios. First, the police may get injured or fell sick. In this case, our ambulance will transport them. And there were other police officers to protect the injured officers on the way to the hospital. For yesterday's unlawful assembly, for A360 ambulances, was exactly this case because it's transporting an officer burned in operation to the hospital. Another scenario will be cases of criminal element, for example, traffic accidents or assaults. And for the A494 ambulances, in which a person claimed was being assaulted, and the police officer have boarded the ambulance to conduct investigation. Afterwards, it was decided that the person don't need to be accompanied to hospital, and the police officer got off the ambulances, and it was captured by the public, and saw that there were a police officer coming down with the ambulance. After it was been decided that did need to be accompanied, and the ambulance just transport the injured person to the hospital. The third scenario, the injured person itself will need to assist with police investigation or arrested. In this case, police officers will board the FSC via ambulances. For A173 ambulances, it was what happened. And this injured person refused to be sent to the hospital, and signed a declaration was taken away by the police for investigation. Another scenario, when an injured person whose mental state is unstable, for example, mentally incapacitated person or a drunk person, that he struggled while our ambulance were not able to control him, we might summon the police to the vehicle to assist. For all the scenarios I mentioned, inside the vehicle, in which there will be an injured person need to be taken to hospital before a policeman boarded the vehicle. And this has been the standing practice, and it's not a special arrangement due to the protests. We hope that the public will get to know more about our work, and the protesters should not obstruct the FSC vehicles and ambulance from doing our work, and the public should not always support for intercepting FSC vehicles. I hope that you can exercise your judgment and should not believe in such baseless rumors. I now hand over back to police. And for the upcoming Q&A session, I will arrange the officer to take the question. We'll now open the floor. TVB. Yesterday, other journalists have plotted when the water cannon vehicle passed by the mosque, it has sprayed twice. When the first was a spray period, maybe inadvertent, however, it stopped right afterwards. For the second time, it was seen to be deliberately targeting the entrance. And how do you explain that this is inadvertent? Besides the mosque, the St. Andrew's Church, the walls and the gate have also been sprayed. And yet the police have not apologized to the church. Is that religious discrimination? And police claimed yesterday that the chief executive and the commissioner have apologized. And for some report yesterday, the water cannon have deliberately aimed at the residents and the press. Over the 4 months, the press at the scene have been subject to unruly treatment by the police. And for this July, when you declared the improvement for 21st of July attack, why didn't the police apologize for these operations? And for your question, I'll first hand over to Mr. Wang to talk about the use of SCMV. Then I'll hand over to Mr. Chuck to talk about the other affected places. I would like to talk about the overall situation. Mr. Wang, for the special crowd management vehicle, I just want to talk about what happened. Our SCMV, leaving from Salisbury Road to Nathan Road for dispersal. At Hai Phong Road, we had faced a huge roadblock. The protesters have set up a huge roadblock and set fire on it. But we need to deal with the roadblocks and the fire at the same time. We found that along Nathan Road, there were a lot of fires, arson and looting, or even assault on people with different political opinions. So we have three major principles on using SCMV. First, there are significant casualties who warrant the use of SCMV.
And the second scenario is that when there is prospect of extensive damage to property, say there is widespread arson or public facilities, or to the scale of 100 traffic lights being damaged, or at major trunk roads being blocked with a view to disrupting police's operation and also disrupting public order, then these three scenarios would justify the use of SCMP for an attempt for crowd dispersal. And the crowd dispersal is really to stop such massive criminal and violent acts that would result in danger to properties and to human lives. And so what happens is that dyed water will spray from water cannon in order to disperse the crowd. And you have to realize that if we do not make use of SCMP, and if we only relied on human force to disperse the crowd, then it would mean that our frontline officers would come into direct contact with protesters, and also they will be in very close contact with reporters as well. And so that will result in even greater danger because of the very close proximity between law enforcers and protesters and reporters. And so when such a situation occurs, then we would deploy SCMP. Of course, there are limits to which we can make use of SCMP, and we have to make sure that the road is safe for the use of SCMP. And we have to make sure that there is no one between us and the targets of SCMP. And so when we deployed SCMP, and before we deploy SCMP, we would keep issuing warnings with only one objective. We hope that anyone present there would leave the scene as soon as possible. Now, if you look around the world, when you look at how law enforcers elsewhere were enforcing the laws, you know that the Hong Kong police force, in comparison, actually has exercised great restraint. And we will issue repeated warnings before we actually deployed SCMP. And so, first of all, we had to clear the very large roadblock. And by the time our SCMP reached the scene, still there were people there. And so if we see that those people still refuse to leave after one final round of warning, then we would have to deploy SCMP, and we will have to operate its weapons. And also, when a water cannon is being fired, then some people might be affected, but we cannot really stop anyone from coming between us and the targets of SCMP. And as our PC, as well as the Chief Executive have indicated this morning, we would like to sincerely apologize to anyone that is being inadvertently affected by the deployment of the SCMP. But you have to understand that the police force actually faces great difficulties when operating the SCMP, and we had already chosen a modus operandi in the use of SCMP in order to result in minimal damage and minimal risk, and at the same time resulting in restoration of public order. So I'm trying to explain to you how difficult it is for us in using SCMP. I hope that through explaining the case, we can let you explain that different groups of people, when being present at the scene of unrest, could actually listen to police's advice so that they would clear the scene before the use of SCMP, so that there won't be collateral damage or collateral injuries being suffered by properties and also by human beings. So we want to really effectively control the crowd with minimal risk and at the same time restoring public order. Have I interrupted you? Actually, we do understand that reporters are also facing difficulties on the scene while they're working. I just want to explain to you that if we put you between the SCMP and the violent protesters, then there will be a lot of risk. Because by the time the violent protesters come up or start to charge, and when you have to get out of the way, then you could very well bump into the SCMP and get injured. And of course, we do understand that reporters fulfill a very important mission when reporting the incident. But we do hope that the reporters can choose a safer manner and report the incident from a safer angle. Of course, we all face difficulties. We are not talking about asking you to leave right away. We are saying that before the SCMP is actually being deployed, reported warnings will have been issued. And also by the time SCMP is about to be deployed, there will be sirens being sounded. And so there will be time for people to leave. So it's not like that within, say, a dozen seconds you will have to clear the scene. And actually we will have given ample warnings and ample alert to everybody on the spot that the SCMP is about to be deployed. So that's our difficulty. The second part of the question, Mr. Chuck. So the reporter asked, since our operations have also affected another religious organization in the form of St. Andrew's Church and also other parties, how come we have not apologized to them? Now, first of all, let me explain why the police had to enforce law, and that was because rioters were using violence there, and rioters were breaking the laws there, and that's why we had to make use of force in order to disperse them. And the use of SCMP was one of the options under our disposal. And yesterday, before we actually did any operation, we already communicated with stakeholders in the district, including Mosque and residents organizations, MTRC, bus companies, and religious organizations. Indeed, religious organizations were one of the targets of our liaison. And when we learned that the colored water cannon actually had affected shops, we actually had come into contact with them and had offered our apologies. But I just want to add that rioters themselves actually have more reason to apologize to Hong Kong people because they have damaged so many places and facilities, and they have really ruined our peace and quiet lifestyle, and they have affected a lot of people. Now, as for whether the reporters must leave the scene, now you have to realize that rioters are now not holding back when trying to attack the police officers. They believe that police officers actually are legitimate targets, and they made use of fuel bombs, corrosive liquid, to attack police officers. And also they made use of bow in order to launch huge boulders at us. And our police officers, when on the ground, had to face such springboard hurling such boulders. And if you are reporters reporting on the scene, I also would like to caution you to pay attention to your own safety, because you could just as easily be hurt by these flying debris. And I myself have also seen that reporters reporting on the scene actually are not especially well protected by protective clothing. And so you have to be mindful of your own safety as well, especially reporters, because when you are on the ground reporting, you might not be totally aware of your surroundings and what's happening around you. And so I just want to advise all people that are resorting to violence that you must stop. And those who are supporting the use of violence, please also stop supporting.
As for your third part of the question, and for the incident you offer your apologies, why didn't you apologize in other incidents? For over the past 4 months, in our operations, the police have been doing its utmost in restoring Hong Kong's order. For this sustained operations, our frontline officers will need to make a lot of instant decisions. And each of these decisions, as you can see, that we've been under the scrutiny of worldwide media. So I can't say that every decision made by our frontline officers is a perfect one. For every decision we make where we see they're incorrect, we need to own up to it, and we need to give an account to the public and make improvements. For this period, that's what we have been doing. And for myself, whether on different media or even at the press briefing, and have apologized for individual incidents. We must understand that each incident is unique. There are causes and context and different reasons, and some of the incidents will require a thorough investigation before arriving at a conclusion. So casually comparing different incidents is not a comprehensive account. And for July 21st is under investigation, and we have made arrests and prosecutions underway. So to arrive at a conclusion at this stage is inappropriate.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Waikit from CNA. I have one question on where your investigation is at this moment. You've spoken to 2,000 over suspected protesters. Can I ask whether there's any headway that you've made in terms of your investigation? Which stage is it at now? Among protesters, have there been any unusual items found on them, such as apart from offensive weapons, have you also been able to trace the kind of communication they've made with people? And I also want to know whether the investigations right now is still confined to just the SAR, or have you also made contact with your counterparts from other parts of the world? My second question, and I think John says that you made a good point that if you are in the wrong, you will admit. And we've seen earlier the religious leaders seem to be very receptive to talking to the authorities. Can I ask whether you were right on this model? Because obviously when I'm on the streets, I see a lot of people who are very angry with the police. Definitely many more community groups that you guys will need to reach out to. We've seen the hard enforcement stance. Can I just ask whether you feel it's important to now beef up your softer approach? And if there is a current softer approach, can I ask how effective do you think it is so far? And then my third question is, you've been showing us week after week the escalated protests. You guys know better than us the evolution of the protests, but we know very little about the police response. Can you share with us what kind of operational approach have you taken, just to make sure that you can stay one step ahead, if not at least be on par with the evolving protests? Thank you.
I'll first invite Mr. Lee to answer the first question, and I will follow up on the other two.
You're right. We are so far arrested over 2,000 protesters. And what I can say is, what is the common point for them is, first of all, you may be aware that they are quite young. And the second is because they are arrested during the protests, they have their own gears, they have all in black, with the respirators, helmet, and goggles, something like that. For some involved in some violence incidents, they will be have some protective gears, like body armors, shin guard, or something like that. But as for you ask for any connection, something like that, I'm not allowed to reveal further about this one. But their affiliations or something like that is also a line of inquiry for us. And that's all my part. Thank you.
For your second question about the softer approach in communication, I'll say the dialogue between the police and this morning with the chief imam and Muslim community leaders in the Kowloon Mosque this morning was sincere and transparent early this morning. We certainly value a soft approach and the importance of maintaining close communication with the community. Firstly, for example, basically before any large-scale protest, our police community relations officers, what we call the PCROs, will contact the communities concerned and forewarn them about the potential threats that they are going to face in the large-scale protest. And PCROs and as well as PPRB, and basically also remind the residents in the area to make preparations. Like we always remind them to shut the windows and stay indoors if necessary. And forewarning through social medias like Facebook will also made frequently as soon as possible. And secondly, our management also held very regular and professional liaisons with consulate of different countries in Hong Kong, so as to maintain close communication with them and to protect the international community staying in Hong Kong. And thirdly, also I think we all aware that we always deploy police negotiation cadre to help the cool down tense situation during the dispersal operations during the last few months, and the result was quite satisfaction. But having said that, I think both police and the public have an important role to play in maintaining the Hong Kong safety and order. And restoring public order depends a lot on police work, but it also depends on the law abidance of the Hong Kong citizens. We must not tolerate violence and lawless behavior. While for your third question about the evolving tactics using by the police, I'll say indeed police did make respond to the evolving threat, in particular the escalating violence as well as the deadly weapon used by the rioters. Despite the difficult situations and the escalation in the levels of violence used, our use of force principle remain unchanged. Only use the minimum force necessary to achieve the lawful purpose. But when deciding the appropriate force, there are three factors to be considered by our frontline officers. That is the level of resistance faced by our police officers at scene, and how those officers perceive the threat and his own abilities. In response to the use of what we call the wildcat tactics or hit and run tactics used by the rioters in the last 2 months, our police officers have indeed adapted our tactics to cope with the escalating threat faced by them. I'm sorry that I cannot disclose exact details of our tactics, but in general, given the escalating violence and the deadly weapons used by the protesters, there need to match our level of force with the force they used. While from the management perspective, we also purchase new tactical suits and protective gears for our officers, because we acknowledge the need and the importance of to protect our officers against the danger posed by the rioters. And we also turn out more auxiliary police officers to support our frontline policing duties like beat patrol and incident call handling. So we are confident that we are capable to and determined to restore Hong Kong public safety and order, of course, with the public support. Thank you.
港台後邊第二行。
Okay. So the police have said on multiple occasions that the pedestrians destroy first, and the police really come to respond to this cause. When dealing with pedestrian destruction, do you think that there are any problem with the handling for the mosque? So the police have apologized for the incident. So would you admit that the police had made a mistake? Would you admit that you had made a mistake? So to drive in SCMV or even issued order to spray, what rank would the officers be, and would they need to be suspended? And yesterday we saw that the police have attend to the scene. However, only 7 hours later, they would visit the mosque, and the police officers did not observe the dress code of the venue. So the police have sprayed the place of worship, and so you admit there's a lack of sensitivity. Would any officers be held accountable if suspended from duty?
I also want to know the investigation on July 21st incident. I just want the police to round up once again. During the past 3 months, how many people have been arrested and also charged for that incident? I do realize that the police have been doing arrests. However, the number of prosecutions actually taken out actually has been low. And so can you explain to us why during the past 3 months, how come the progress has been so slow, and especially in comparison with your speed in processing and also charging protesters being arrested? Okay, so there are 4 parts to the question. And Mr. Wang, first of all, will explain to you the use of SCMP. And yesterday, actually last night, we went to the mosque, and Mr. Mohammed was there, and Mr. Mohammed will give a response in relation to that meeting. And I understand that everybody is concerned about July 21st incident because today is October 21st. So I am going to ask Mr. Lee to give you a progress report on our investigation into the July 21st incident. I think even though 4 questions have been asked, I do not suppose other reporters will mind. Now, as for the manner of handling, now exactly what are you referring to? Are you referring to the manner in which we handle the rioters? Are you referring to the manner in which we handled the aftermath of our handling the rioters? The speaker is speaking off mic. I'm sorry. The speaker is speaking off mic. Now, since you put it this way, I just want to say that the rioters were not only blocking the road. The rioters were not only blocking the road. Apart from blocking the road, they also did a lot of other damage. And the worst was setting fires. I think the Fire Services Department already explained to you that fires could spread very easily, especially in a crowded and congested place like Hong Kong. Now, as for our way of handling the rioters, Mr. Jie has already pointed out, we will make use of our tactic in accordance with the prevailing situation. And I do not believe that there is anything wrong with our way of handling the rioters yesterday. As for collateral damage and collateral parties and human beings being affected, as I said, we have already made apologies to them. And I just want to say that we are also awaiting eagerly apologies from the rioters. Now, as for whether any officers will be suspended from duty, I just want to reiterate that We have to deploy force in order to deal with the situation on the ground. It's very difficult to separate the two issues because cause and effect are very closely linked with each other. And so whether it's a right move or a wrong move is very, very dependent on what choices do you have on the ground. Now, if it's a very difficult situation on the ground and you have no other options, and if you have to protect people and property being hurt and damaged on a massive scale, and if there are no other options inside, then we have to resort to SCMP. And SCMP, therefore, in such a situation, is the minimal force that is available. Now, if you have looked at TV reports on incidents elsewhere in the world, you know that Hong Kong police officers have been really, very restrained. Now, if someone has broken the law, he has broken the law. Whether or not he is immediately being arrested or charged, doesn't matter. He still will have to face consequences. Of course, you can make use of excuse, and you can say that you have justification, and you may transfer the risk onto other people so that we cannot catch you immediately, but it doesn't change the fact that you have broken the law. And please understand that when we enforce the law, sometimes we face very difficult situations. I just want to say that our tactics have been under constant scrutiny and have been under constant review, with a review to bettering them and improving upon them so that we can even more effectively achieve our goals. As for whether someone should be blamed and should be suspended from duties, I don't think that is helpful here. And now, I think what should be done at this point in time is to say that, or is to say no to violence, and also to stop people from rampantly and violently damaging our society. The speaker is speaking off mic. So you want to know who makes the decision on deploying SCMP. As I said, there are 3 scenarios under which SCMP will be deployed. And so that is an operational decision-making process. And so it's not really down to the guy actually driving the SCMP. And before SCMP is being deployed, we will have to do a lot of coordination beforehand. We have to assess the crowd dispersal results, possible crowd dispersal results. And of course, within the vehicle or on board of the vehicle, there is a ranking officer that will be making decision on the spot in order to make a decision as to when exactly will the water spray be used. I can tell you that it is a sergeant grade officer that is on the spot in order to make the decision on the trigger. But does it mean that the whole decision or the whole responsibility is being placed onto him, or whole blame should be played onto him? I don't think so, because it is really a whole series of considerations that have to be made by the police force and police management authority, as well as frontline officers, in order to protect public safety and public life and limb. Mr. O'Mam, would you please take question number 3?
I
would like to answer 2 questions. First of all, about the attire for Muslim and also sensitivity in dealing with Muslim community. I'm also going to answer in English because most of your question, this part of the question, have to do with ethnic minorities.
Officers entered the mosque, and the other one is sensitivity in handling mosque incident. I
just want to say that for issue number 1, now regarding sensitivity, after this incident has occurred, because we are so sensitive to it, and that's why we immediately took action to get into contact with the Muslim community. And we have to make members of the public as well as the Muslim community understand that what the police were doing was to disperse the crowd in order to protect the Kowloon Mosque. Of course, you use the word that the Kowloon Mosque was being hit. Then, of course, it is really subject to a different interpretation. Actually, the water cannon wasn't firing at the Kowloon Mosque. It was only firing towards the crowd to disperse them. And the mosque was hit inadvertently. And we respect all religions and all religious organizations. And we have communicated to the Muslim community that we absolutely had no malicious intent and we had no intention of offending any religious organizations, including Islam. And Hong Kong police force have had a very long history of cooperating with ethnic minorities, and also there are many ethnic minority officers on the police force, including myself. And so we do understand sensitivity issue very, very well. And I'm sure me and my colleagues would not target any particular religious structures in the course of our actions. And if, because of our action, there is collateral inconveniences and damage to the mosque entrance and front door. Of course, some Muslim community members have expressed dissatisfaction, and we do understand that, and we have taken action to rectify that. And so what have we done after that incident has happened? And so it's not like that we have only started taking action 7 hours after the incident. Actually, immediately after the incident occurred, we already got into contact with Chief Imam of Hong Kong's Muslim community and also other Muslim community leaders, and to explain to them what exactly happened. And also many police volunteers came into contact with me saying that they were willing to do cleansing work. But because it was still very close in time to the unrest, and so it was still a very raw situation, and that's why we believe that it wasn't a very good time for cleansing to occur. And so we waited till night, and we wanted to express very sincerely our apologies, and that's why PPRP as well as myself and the Yau Chi Mong district commander had all gone down to the Kowloon Mosque and meet with the Kowloon Muslim community, and so we explained to them very sincerely that it was never our intent to affect the Muslim community as well as the Kowloon Mosque. And over the years, the ethnic minorities have been helped by the police in many, many ways. For instance, the Gemstone and Himalaya programs actually have featured police officers who volunteer their time in order to help ethnic minorities members and to help ethnic minority people to learn Chinese so that they have an easier time in sitting for police recruitment tests and also find other jobs. Now, this particular incident may give people the impression that the police force does not respect ethnic minorities or religions. And I just want to say that actually it's the opposite that is correct, and the police force has always shown great respect for religious organizations and have helped ethnic minorities a lot. And after this incident, some people try to stir things up on the internet, saying that the police's actions are targeting the Kowloon Mosque, and the police deliberately offended Islam, and therefore they called for a jihad being staged against the police. And so these people on the internet are trying to spread hatred, but their aim will not be achieved because the Muslim community in Hong Kong has always been very peace-loving, and Islam is about love and peace, not hatred and violence. And the reason why we all came down in person to the Kowloon Mosque and to explain to the Muslim community was to show that we respected religions and religious organizations, and we anticipated that people would try to stir things up over the incident. And the chief imam as well as the Muslim community leaders were very, very receptive towards our apologies and showed appreciation that we took the initiative to come into contact with them. And so that's my answer to you about sensitivity. Secondly, about attire, when police officers went down there, indeed female police officers also were deployed to go down to the Kowloon Mosque. And so they were being accused of not having appropriate attire on them. Actually, Islam calls for modesty in terms of female attire. And so when our colleague, a female colleague, went down there, including female colleagues went down there, when they were in the Kowloon Mosque, they were very respectful, and their attires were all very, very modest. And also they did not go into the prayer area of the Kowloon Mosque, but the community center of the Kowloon Mosque, in other words, the office area of the Kowloon Mosque. And so no police officers have shown any disrespect towards the religion.
Re-answer my question in English. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to the Muslim audience. I understand that the incident of the yesterday's incident of dispersal, which the special crowd management vehicle was used on Nathan Road outside the Kowloon Mosque, has caused considerable criticism from some members of the public as it affected the mosque. There was also a question asked on the dressing, so I'll address them. Now, first of all, I would like to clarify that the purpose of police operation was to disperse a crowd that was very dangerous, and there was also information that some element might damage the mosque. So the police operation and objective was very clear, to do the dispersal and also to protect the mosque included. Once this incident occurred, we have sincerely apologized. We proactively contacted the mosque and Muslim community leaders. We have offered our explanation that it was unintended. The mosque was not target. That the force all along has stressed on religious freedom and respect for all religious faith and religious sites and buildings in Hong Kong. Now, our response has been immediate. It is not as though people claim that we went down 7 hours later. In fact, we have been contacting community leaders. There were volunteers from many police who contacted me directly, offered to go with us to clean the place of worship. However, the situation, as you might also noted, was rather dangerous for us to go down at that moment. And having consulted the mosque officials, we went down later in the night when things have rather settled. So our officers have offered clear explanations, and the district commander of Yaojin clearly expressed our apology for the incident. And we offered to clean the place that very night. I want to stress that the Hong Kong police has a very long history of working with ethnic minorities and people with different faiths, and we do assist them in a number of ways. I'm an example and testimony to that. We respect religion, we respect ethnic minorities. There is no issue that the incident itself was a challenge to any faith, as somebody might claim online. They have been inciting and inflaming the situation, hoping to further divide our community and to sow the seed of violence. They have been calling that it was an act of declaring war on Muslims, deliberate insult, and a formal declaration of jihad against the Hong Kong police and Hong Kong government. Now, these people, what they do not understand is that Hong Kong Muslims are very rational. They are a very peaceful community who has a long history in Hong Kong. They will not use violence and hatred to solve any problems. The second question regarding the dressing, the question is that some of our officers went into mosque without fully covered, which is a disrespect to Islam. I would say that the Quranic requirement for a dress of a Muslim woman is to cover their bosom and to dress modestly and do not expose except what must not ordinarily appear. That is the principle. Now, our officers went in for a duty. They went in to help the mosque. They went in for official visit. They are not Muslims. Yet they dress before they gone inside. They purposely mindful of dressing modestly. That satisfied the condition. The other thing is that it was a community center, and they only approached the office instead of the prayer halls and things. I think our officers have shown utmost respect to the religion, to the community, and that is our central message. Thank you.
我而家因為呢位記者問咗4條，咁所以大家
Since the report has asked for questions, so you want to, I will answer question on July 21st before moving to the next question. I would like to answer on the progress of the July 21st. As of now, well, for the crime squad of New Cherry North, we have arrested 34 men aged between 18 to 60. 18 to 60, and 6 of them have been charged with engaging in riot. 6 of those. We have actively following up these cases. If we found enough evidence, that we will consult DOJ and hand over to the courts. And others, we're investigating the others still on the run. As for the press have asked that the police have not been too proactive on the July 24th investigation and prosecution. Based on our figures, I can't give you a full picture. As for the arrests on the following dates, I just want to provide you with some numbers to refute what the reporter said. On 12th of June, we have arrested 39, arrested 8, and on 21st of June, we have arrested 5, and 5 of them been taken to court. And on 26th of June, we arrested 6, and 2 of them have been charged. And 1st of July, we arrested 39, 10 was been charged, and on 21st of July, we have arrested 34 and 6 have been charged. And the 31st of August, we have arrested 65, 2 have been charged. And for these 6 familiar dates, the arrest figures and prosecution figures for 21st of July for Yuen Long, the police attached great importance and investigation, and with enough evidence and after liaising with DOJ, we had taken the prosecutions. So may I stress that for all the violent incidents occurred over the past 4 months, we have taken them seriously and would investigate them and prosecute fairly and impartially. So while discussing this in the future, I hope you can bring the right message to the public. Last 3 questions. Stan News. This is my first turn in over 2 weeks. I'd like to follow on the water cannon vehicle. Correct me if I was wrong. For the past 6 months, we've been concerned about the water cannon vehicles. The PPRB claimed that the manual took 6 months to craft. So our reporters believe that the police will not casually deploy the SCMV. So you claim that it was the roadblock at Haifeng Road. However, there were 75 meters apart from the mosque, and clips have shown that the SCMV had stopped before spraying for the second time. And it showed that there were the former president of the Association and Mr. Jeremy Tam was also present. How can Mr. Muhammad still claim that you have been protecting the mosque? Because they are not destroying the mosque. And would the policemen at the scene see that the legislator and the former president have been destroying the mosque? So why was spraying at those people with though is protecting the mosque? So where are your justifications? And for the Mr. Mohan Shigani, who had been doused in blue dye, is unwilling to forgive the Hong Kong policeman. He claimed that the Hong Kong police should have a bottom line. Is what been reported by the Now News. For the Muslim community groups, the police commissioner had explained apology to the person, and for the Mr. Shigani would consider apologizing. Yesterday, there were a lot of incidents targeting reporters. For example, being pepper sprayed, and the Apple Daily reporter had a gun pointed at him, and in Simsa Choi in Mongkok, there were handheld tear gas grenade being thrown over the head. Well, Mr. Chek have advised us to be careful. Well, I have been burned by a tear gas myself. I can show you the scars. The press is more worried about the police ammunition. May I ask Mr. Chek, will the PGO allow us to shoot and would not get in our way? And now that the threat of ammunition, was that be in compliance with the PGO? If we have been injured, would you consider apologizing to us? I would first let Mr. Wang answer the first part of the question at SCMB. And the second part, I'll have Mr. Chek to talk about our visit to the mosque. And the third question, I'll have Mr. Kong to talk about the press situation. Can you hear me? For your first question, I had just spoken about what happened for the SCMV yesterday. For this, you claim there is 75-meter distance. However, our SCMV is about over 10 meters long. And also the roadblock, well, we need to clear it before forward. I suppose that 75 meters isn't that long. Oh, thank you for your question. I want to set out clearly. Yesterday, we were confronted with a large unlawful assembly that will congregate to in front of any target and commit destruction, whether they are covered or not. If we don't stop them effectively, well, let's not say a particular location. Well, would they vandalize the shops and so on? After balancing the risk and our operation risk, we had no choice. We use the necessary minimum level of force to disperse the crowd effectively. Well, when their faces have been covered and so there's no fear of being identified, they will congregate. For people, if they see a target, they will set fire and pry open the roller shutters and commit vandalism. If the police don't act proactively, how can we restore public safety and order? So you claim the press will be affected, or so as well as others. We have to understand the challenges. Besides of apologies, we won't escape from it. Well, it's not something we intend to do. However, we're subject to a lot of constraints. And after we have balancing the risk, we have used the necessary level of minimum force to deal with the situation. Once again, may I repeat that please leave our operation area. When we issue warnings or blast sirens when we're about to act, I know that the camera wants for the images, but can you step further a bit so that keeping yourself safe and also achieve your goals? So Mr. Chek had a point. Speaker off mic. I don't agree with you. Well, it was an illegal assembly. Those people should not be present at the scene since it was dangerous. We worried about the public safety because we will first issue warnings so that you can leave. If we don't leave, however, to meet our operation goals, that we will be subject to constraints. I believe that there is no perfect tactic that is risk-free. However, we have to minimize such risks. That's why we will resort to the minimum level of necessary force. I hope that you can cooperate with the police and say no to violence and listen to our warnings and leave the scene as soon as possible and maintain a safe distance. Thank you. For the second question, I will have Mr. Mohammed take the question. I'll have Mr. Kong answer the third question.
Actually, Mr. Wong has already touched on this. During the past few months, there were a lot of police operations, and in terms of arrest and in terms of crowd dispersal, of course, the reporters had to be there to report on those situations, and we hope that they were in a safe spot at the same time while reporting those situations. And everybody's safety is very important. Reporter safety and police officer safety are very important. And we can see that very often in police's operations, reporters were stationed or being present between police officers and the rioters. Of course, that might be a very vantage point for reporters, but unfortunately, those places were also very, very dangerous. Say when the police had to deploy force, say to deploy pepper spray or to deploy tear gas onto rioters, but reporters were in between us and the rioters. Then, of course, the reporters were in danger, and the police, of course, didn't want to cause any collateral damage or injuries. And I think repeatedly we have already cautioned our reporters to think more about their own safety while on the ground reporting the situations. Now, someone has asked us how come when arrests have been made, immediately a certain area will be cordoned off, and also a blockade line would be formed. Now, this is all because violence has escalated, and there were rioters who were trying to snatch guns away from police officers and throwing fuel bombs at police officers. And that's why once an arrest has been made, a blockade line would immediately be formed in order to protect police officers. And you can see that whenever police officers have subdued any rioters, then several police officers will converge onto the arrest point and will try to form a blockade area in order to create a safety zone for police officers. Because if the police officer making the arrest actually is still in very close proximity to other rioters, then it is very easy for rioters to make use of sharp objects to attack police officers making the arrest. And so, once again, we have no choice but to do this. And if you are present between police officers and rioters, and of course, there will be danger that you have to face. And reporters, while exercising their duties, really have to realize that if they are present between us and the rioters, then of course they place themselves in danger. Now, Mr. Mohammed, your question number one. If indeed the water cannon has hit other people and also the Kowloon Mosque, then how can we say that we're protecting the Kowloon Mosque and other people? Okay, so there were two questions. And of course, there were other people there, reporters and Mr. Chakani, Indian Association leader, and also councillors. And so you said that how could we say that with those people in front of Kowloon Mosque and we still hit the Kowloon Mosque, how can we say that we are protecting the Kowloon Mosque? And you also say that Mr. Chugani refused to forgive us. Then what is our response? Now, my answer is that indeed the water spray hit the entrance as well as the front door of the Kowloon Mosque. Then one of the objectives of using the water spray was to protect the Kowloon Mosque. I myself am a Muslim. On press day on Friday, many Muslims have already came to me saying that they were really worried that the Kowloon Mosque was going to be a target of attack. And so one of our objectives was really to prevent people from aggregating or congregating around the Kowloon Mosque with the possibility of them attacking the Kowloon Mosque. And also along Hai Phong Road, there was a crowd dispersal operations. And now because the crowd were being dispersed in the vicinity of Kowloon Mosque, there was the possibility that Kowloon Mosque was or could be affected. Now, I just want to say that one of our objectives very clearly was that we wanted to protect the Kowloon Mosque. And of course, the results of our actions resulted in some misunderstanding on the part of some people and dissatisfaction on others. And that's why, very sincerely, we took the first instance to come into contact with the Kowloon Mosque authority and make apologies to them. As for your second question about Mr. Chugani, starting from last night, I did try to get into contact with Mr. Chugani, and I will continue to try to come into contact with him and try to clarify the situation with him.
As to if the end result of the police operation outside the mosque resulting in the mosque being sprayed, at least the front gate, an entrance, then how can you claim that you were trying to, your mission was, one of the mission was to protect the mosque, as I have just mentioned. Now, I want to reiterate that what I have said is very clear. The mission was to protect the mosque. Now, I, as a Muslim myself, in the Friday prayer just before this weekend, I have received numerous Muslims' comments that they worry about the safety of the mosque, that it might be damaged, that they might have to organize people themselves, volunteers, to go and protect the mosque. Now, that was also one of the policing priorities to ensure that the mosque, the place of worship, is not to be affected. Now, that's why there was a violence there. There was petrol bombs. There were barricades. There were things, and the officers were doing a dispersed operation, and the mission was to protect the mosque as well, clear cut, and they did not want people to gather outside the mosque. And the fact that, you know, the officers may not immediately recognize who is a troublemaker, who is not, that's a fact. The other question is there is a gentleman, Mr. Mohan Chugani, who was outside. He made a comment that he will not forgive the police operation. I understand. I have been trying to get in touch with him myself, and I'll continue to do so. Thank you very much.
後邊第二行新華社。
新华社提问两个问题，第一个问题是就是关于近期的话就破坏特定商户这样的一些行为，这样的警方因此已经拘捕了多少人，包括一些我们说比较关注的一些私了的案件，警方
regarding
侦破的进度怎么样，拘捕了多少人？
Rioters are beating up other people and doing lynch action. I'd like to know the police's investigations progress on this, and also regarding damage to the shops. How are the police going to respond to that? And also, when compared to other countries police forces actually have one way of dealing with riots, but Hong Kong police has got its own way of dealing with the riots. It seems that the two are different, and so how do you make the comparison between the two?
For the past few months, you may notice there is some case of so-called vigilante justice. Let's say it started with a verbal scuffle, then they resort to violence, and usually, they're outnumbered. I don't have the full set of figures. However, there is few cases I would like to highlight, which I can provide you some progress. On 13th of August in the airport, there a mainland reporter that's been attacked. We arrested 3 men and 1 woman. And 14th of September in MY Plaza, there were a couple. Due to political differences, they were attacked by a group of people. We arrested 2 men. And 21st of September, Yuen Long, there was a man that was attacked and we arrested 2 men. And the 6th of October in Sam Shui Po, a taxi driver, an elderly taxi driver that was beat to bleeding. We arrested 2 men. I must admit it's hard to investigate these cases because there were a large group of people and it was covered. It's difficult to confirm the identity of the assailants. However, we will not give up on these cases. So you are injuring other people and resorting to violence is unacceptable. Final point. The persons arrested, if they involve a group of people, we will charge with the same offense. Well, in these cases, you just can't say I just slapped him. However, if that person was heavily injured or even lost their lives, everyone involved will be charged with the same offense. And from years of experience, very often these cases, it may lead to fatality. I appeal once again, please do not resort of taking justice into your own hands to resolve political differences. For a second question, I'll have Mr. Kong take the question. We noticed that over the past 4 months, and actually around the world there are different events taking place. I'm not in a position to comment on each of them. In other countries, for example, they will regulate assemblies and processions. Within a short time, they will arrest a large number of people. Over the past 4 months, we have arrested 2,600 odd people, and some places in just a few days they've arrested 3,000 people, and they will be sent to court extremely quickly. And some places may regulate the internet or other laws. It will be subject to the different cultures and jurisdictions. As a law enforcement agency, on the use of force, the police of different places have their own use of force guidelines. Well, we had explained on many occasions on this press platform our use of force principles, and my colleague had just mentioned that we had never changed this principle. For example, we will use the minimum level of necessary force in dealing with situations. Well, I call that the use of force as reactionary. If the rioters don't resort to violence, they will not use violence. I appealed many times. We would want to see some peaceful, orderly procession and assemblies. Well, in early times they may start vandalizing after when it got to nightfall. Well, yesterday the vandalism started right after 3. So does that mean we have to sit our hands while they commit the arson and vandalizing? It's our duty to maintain order and bring the offenders to justice. So our use of force is quite different from other places. And Hong Kong people have been proud of its low crime figures. And we can see there's a lot of people is shielding and tolerating with crimes. So, and some people will feel that to target people with different political views or shops with different political views, and it's actually acceptable to vandalize the shops. And some people will glorify them as decoration and renovations. We told them many times it's criminal damage. It could be arrested and imprisoned. So violence is not a solution. You can see a lot of selfish and aimless lashing out. We don't want to see the public to accept this as a new norm. If we become the new normal, who would stand to be affected? That would be the law-abiding citizens. I have appealed many times to make law-abiding citizens to say no to this decorations and all this renovations, violence, and arson. I see there are ground-level shops being set alight. I'm worried about the residents upstairs. What may happen to them? A lot of the old districts have a lot of old elder residents that may not able to move quickly. We have to say no to violence. That's all I want to say. The last question of the day, Ming Pao. So just now you said that you did not target the mosque intentionally, and yet to be used the word inadvertently. So every time you have a operation record for the SCMV, so the officer in charge of the vehicle, was that any unhuman or an operation error? What have been found for your preliminary investigation? And you just outlined the principle of using the SCMV. And going back to the papers of the security panel, and you claim one of the major principles that police will only target a violent confrontation, but not individual protesters. For the dozen or so that were standing outside the mosque, they did not commit any violent acts, and yet they've been hit by the SCMV. Is the principle been violated? Is that you have no option but to deploy the SCMV to disperse these peaceful people? And yesterday on Mong Kok and Sam Shui Po, the SCMV was deployed. We see a lot of the citizens, innocent pedestrians, have also been affected. Have the police reviewed that in this crowded situation, that whether it's appropriate to deploy them that led to so many shops and the innocent citizens have been hit? Did you have no choice but to use SCMV as these locations? So 3 questions. I'll defer to Mr. Wang on the SCMV. For your question, I'll try to answer them. Your first question, whether colleagues have breached the guidelines. I have talked to the colleague concerned. His purpose and the operation constraints. So the operation goal and the constraints and the challenges of operating SCMV. When you're operating such large piece of machinery and also require a teamwork in arriving at a decision, I consider that difficult. And furthermore, and Mr. Mohammed had explained, what was our goal? Well, back then, we're not just talking about this people. So why we need to conduct this press? Because someone was setting fire, and when crowds congregate, they will set fire, or there were assault and looting. Well, you claim they're simply spraying on people's faces. Was it justified? Would it hurt other people? All these violence acts that would endanger others and also extensive damage to property. Well, that exactly calls for the SCMV to be deployed as a strategic and a safer way to disperse the crowds. In different places around the world, that has been a common practice. They will be used in cities. For Hong Kong, as we know, it's a very cramped place. I hope that you could be more understanding. In Hong Kong, rather crowded street, we are not that experienced in operating in this environment. So this is the 4th month we have been operating SCMV, and each month we've been reviewing and how to make improvements. For the operation mode, would need experience to get better over time. And of course, no doubt we need to have a lot of considerations. However, there's no way that we can guarantee that it will not affect others. That's why we come forward today and we don't nothing to hide. For the people, we don't intend to affect. I express apologies. I want the public to understand the pragmaticness and the feasibility. I hope that we can have a more return to a normal society. May I supplement? When using the SCMV, sometimes it may affect shops or otherwise pedestrians. For the shops, that was inevitable because we did not have a choice of where the rioters vandalized, and while for the pedestrians, they have a choice of leaving. Sometimes the citizens may need to go to other places. However, they take heed of police warning and will take heed of the situation at the scene. Before we use any force, you will see that before each side verbal warning will raise up the flag, and a second verbal warning and put up the flag before using any force. And our SCMV is a huge vehicle, and it should be noticeable by anyone. As soon as you see this vehicle, you know that we shall act very soon. And before we act, we would broadcast through our audio system. If you're not taking part in the riots, please leave the confrontation area and please go to, for example, the side streets and put yourself out of harm's way. We don't want to injure innocent civilians. Thus, we shall give clear audio messages and also please pay media to police broadcast and media news. Thank you all.